A single dad found a woman standing on a bridge at 3 a.m., but when her last words before he grabbed her revealed a secret that could destroy both their families, will saving her life mean losing everything he loves? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The late-night fog rolled thick across Willow Creek Bridge, turning the world into a ghostly blur. Ethan Cole's tired eyes struggled to stay focused on the road ahead as his old pickup truck rumbled across the wooden planks. The double shift at Marie's diner had worn him down, but bills needed paying and Lily needed new school shoes. His fingers drummed against the worn steering wheel, mind already drifting to home where his daughter slept under the watchful eye of Mrs. Peterson from next door. The bridge creaked beneath his tires, its familiar sound almost lost beneath the roar of the swollen creek below. Spring rains had turned the usually gentle water into an angry torrent. The truck's headlights cut through the mist, creating eerie shadows that danced along the bridge's metal railings. Ethan blinked hard, forcing himself to concentrate. That's when he saw her. A dark figure standing on the wrong side of the safety rail, her dress billowing in the wind like a ghost's shroud. "Dear God," he whispered, his foot instinctively easing off the gas. The truck slowed to a crawl, gravel crunching under the tires. The woman didn't move, didn't even seem to notice his approach. She stood perfectly still, hands gripping the railing behind her, face turned down toward the churning water 30 feet below. Even through the fog, Ethan could see she was trembling. His heart pounded against his ribs as he carefully pulled the truck to a stop, leaving the headlights on to illuminate the scene. Years of grief counseling after Sarah's death had taught him how fragile life could be, how desperate people could become. He knew he had to move carefully. Ethan rolled down his window, the cool night air rushing in. "Ma'am," he called out, trying to keep his voice steady and calm. "Ma'am, please step back over. Whatever it is, we can talk about it." She didn't respond at first, but he saw her shoulders tense at the sound of his voice. The fog swirled around her like a shroud, making her seem almost unreal. "Please," he tried again, slowly opening his door. "Just talk to me." Her head turned slightly, just enough for him to catch a glimpse of her tear-stained face in the truck's headlights. She was younger than he'd first thought, probably in her mid-30s, with features twisted in pain that made his chest ache with recognition. He'd seen that same despair in his own mirror after Sarah died. "Tell my little boy." Her voice was barely a whisper, carried to him on the wind. "I'm sorry." The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. He was already moving, scrambling out of the truck, his work boots hitting the ground hard. She was leaning forward now, her grip on the railing loosening. "No!" The shout tore from his throat as he sprinted toward her. Time seemed to slow down, like in those nightmares where you can never run fast enough. But this was real, terrifyingly, heart-stoppingly real. Her fingers left the railing just as Ethan reached her. His arms wrapped around her waist, fingers clutching the fabric of her dress as he yanked her back from the edge. The force of it sent them both stumbling backward onto the bridge's wooden planks. They landed hard, Ethan taking the brunt of the impact. The woman fought him for a moment, a strangled cry escaping her lips. But then something seemed to break inside her. Her struggles ceased, replaced by deep, racking sobs that shook her entire body. Ethan didn't let go. He couldn't. Instead, he held her tightly as she cried, one arm still secure around her waist, while his other hand moved to support her head against his shoulder. Her tears soaked through his diner uniform, but he barely noticed. "It's not your time," he whispered, the words coming from somewhere deep inside him. "It's not your time." The roar of the creek below seemed to fade away, replaced by the sound of her crying and the beating of his own heart. The fog continued to swirl around them, two souls connected in the darkness by pain and a desperate grab that had saved a life. They sat there on the rough wooden planks of Willow Creek Bridge, a stranger holding another stranger, while the night pressed in around them. Ethan knew the cold would soon seep into their bones, knew they couldn't stay here forever, but for now he just held on. Sometimes that was all you could do, hold on and wait for the storm to pass. Her sobs gradually quieted to hiccups and shaky breaths, but she remained curled against him, as if afraid to face the world again. Ethan understood that too. He kept his voice gentle when he finally spoke again. "My truck's right there. Let me take you somewhere safe. Please." She trembled in his arms but managed a tiny nod. It was enough. Ethan shifted carefully, maintaining his protective hold as he helped her to her feet. Her legs were unsteady, and she swayed dangerously, but he kept her upright, supporting most of her weight. The few steps to his truck felt like miles. The woman's breath came in ragged gasps, and Ethan could feel her heart racing where her body pressed against his side. When they reached the passenger door, he opened it one-handed, never loosening his other arm from around her waist. "I've got you," he murmured, helping her climb into the cab. Her movements were mechanical, as if she were moving through a dream or a nightmare. Ethan quickly closed the door and hurried around to the driver's side, his own hands shaking as he gripped the steering wheel. The truck's engine rumbled to life, headlights cutting through the fog as Ethan carefully turned them around. Beside him, the woman had drawn her knees up to her chest, making herself as small as possible. She stared straight ahead, tears still sliding silently down her cheeks. The truck's door groaned as Ethan helped Grace inside. Her dark hair hung in wet strings from the fog, and her whole body shook like a leaf in autumn. Without hesitation, he reached behind the seat and pulled out his worn denim jacket, the one he kept for emergencies. "Here," he said softly, wrapping it around her shoulders. "You're freezing." Grace pulled the jacket tight, but didn't speak. Her eyes remained fixed on some distant point through the windshield, tears still streaming silently down her cheeks. The dashboard clock's red numbers glowed 3:12 a.m., casting a faint crimson tint across her face. "I'm Ethan," he offered, keeping his voice gentle as he started the engine. "Would you tell me your name?" She swallowed hard, her throat working. "Grace," she whispered, so quietly he almost missed it. When he asked for her last name, she just shook her head, clutching the jacket tighter. The truck's heater wheezed to life, pushing warm air through the cabin. Ethan pulled away from the bridge carefully, watching Grace from the corner of his eye. Her breathing had steadied somewhat, but tremors still ran through her body every few seconds. "There's a diner just up ahead," he said, navigating through the fog. "Still open for the overnight truckers. We could get some coffee, warm up properly. What do you say?" Grace didn't respond immediately, but she gave a tiny nod. Ethan took that as agreement and steered them toward Marie's diner, where he'd finished his shift just an hour ago. The fluorescent lights of the diner cut through the misty darkness, the open sign buzzing faintly. Only 2 trucks sat in the lot, their drivers visible through the windows hunched over late-night meals. Ethan parked close to the entrance. "We don't have to talk," he assured her. "But you look like you could use something warm to drink." Inside, Sally, the night waitress, raised her eyebrows at seeing Ethan back so soon but didn't comment. He guided Grace to a corner booth, far from the truckers, where they could have some privacy. "2 coffees, Sal," he called softly. "And maybe some of that apple pie?" Grace sank into the vinyl seat, still wearing his jacket despite the diner's warmth. Her hands trembled as she wrapped them around the coffee mug Sally brought over. Several minutes passed in silence, broken only by the quiet clink of spoons and the distant murmur of the truckers' conversation. "I'm a nurse," Grace suddenly said, her voice rough. "Was a nurse?" She stared into her coffee as if reading tea leaves. 8 years at Memorial Hospital. 8 years of double shifts, extra training, perfect evaluations. Her fingers tightened around the mug. Didn't matter in the end. Ethan waited patiently, adding a packet of sugar to his coffee more for something to do than any real desire for sweetness. "They said it was budget cuts," she continued, bitter pain lacing her words. "But I saw the looks, heard the whispers. The new head nurse didn't want." She trailed off, but her hand unconsciously touched her dark skin. 3 weeks later, they hired someone else, someone more suitable. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Grace took a shaky breath. "Then David, my ex, he used it all against me in court. No job, no stability." Her voice cracked. "They took my baby, my little Caleb. He's in foster care now, and I can't." Fresh tears spilled onto her cheeks. "I can't even afford a lawyer to fight back." Ethan pushed the untouched pie closer to her, his heart aching with familiar pain. He recognized the hollow look in her eyes. He'd seen it in his own mirror plenty of times after Sarah passed. "Everything I worked for," Grace whispered. "Everything I am. Mother, nurse, provider. It's all gone. What's left?" She wiped roughly at her tears. "I couldn't even." Her eyes darted toward the direction of the bridge, and she shuddered. The sky outside had begun to lighten, the first gray hints of dawn pushing back the night. Grace's coffee had gone cold, untouched except for those first few sips. "Why did you even bother?" she asked suddenly, looking at Ethan for the first time since the bridge. Her eyes held equal parts desperation and accusation. Ethan set down his own mug, memories of his darkest days after losing Sarah flooding back. "Because someone once pulled me back too," he answered simply, his voice thick with understanding. Morning sunlight streamed through the windows of Ethan's modest two-story home, casting warm rectangles across the worn wooden floors. The house was small but tidy, with family photos lining the walls and cheerful yellow curtains that brightened the living room. Grace sat rigidly on the edge of the faded blue couch, her fingers twisting the hem of the oversized sweater Ethan had lent her. "Please, make yourself comfortable," Ethan said, his voice gentle. "I'll get some fresh towels and check on Lily." He hesitated at the bottom of the stairs, looking back at her with concern. "Will you be okay for a minute?" Grace managed a small nod, though her eyes darted nervously around the unfamiliar space. Everything felt surreal after the events at the bridge. The morning light seemed too bright, too normal for someone who had nearly stepped into darkness just hours ago. The sound of quick footsteps thundered down the stairs, and a small whirlwind of energy burst into the room. Lily Cole appeared, her brown hair in messy braids and wearing mismatched pajamas covered in stars and rainbows. Her eyes lit up at the sight of Grace. "Daddy, you didn't tell me we had a visitor." Lily bounced on her toes, radiating pure childhood excitement. Ethan reached for his daughter's shoulder. "Lily, honey, this is—" "You're so pretty," Lily interrupted, skipping over to stand in front of Grace. "I'm Lily. I'm 10. Do you like pancakes? Daddy makes the best pancakes in the whole world." Grace felt her throat tighten at the child's innocent enthusiasm. Yes, I like pancakes," she managed to say. Lily's face broke into a wide smile, revealing a gap where her front tooth was missing. Then, as if sharing a wonderful secret, she leaned in close to Grace and whispered, "Mommy says you're my angel." The words hung in the air like suspended crystal. Ethan's sharp intake of breath was audible in the sudden silence. His face had gone pale, and he stared at his daughter with a mix of wonder and concern. Grace felt her heart skip a beat. What did you say, sweetheart?" Lily nodded earnestly, completely unaware of the impact of her words. "Mommy tells me things sometimes in my dreams. Last night she said an angel was coming to help us, and here you are." She gestured at Grace with complete conviction. Ethan cleared his throat, his voice slightly unsteady. "Lily, honey, remember what we talked about? About not overwhelming our guests?" But Lily was already tugging on Grace's hand. "Come on, you can sit next to me for breakfast. Daddy, we're having pancakes, right? With blueberries?" The kitchen was small but homey, with crayon drawings stuck to the refrigerator and morning light streaming through a window over the sink. Grace found herself being guided to a chair at the round kitchen table while Lily chattered away about her favorite breakfast toppings. Ethan moved around the kitchen with practiced efficiency, pulling out bowls and ingredients. His movements seemed deliberate, as if focusing on the familiar task helped him process what had just happened. "Lily," he said softly, "why don't you show Grace your drawings while I make breakfast?" "Oh, yes!" Lily darted from the room and returned moments later with an armful of papers. She spread them across the table, creating a colorful gallery of childhood artwork. "This is our house, and this is my school, and this is my best friend Katie's dog." Grace found herself drawn into Lily's world of crayon masterpieces. The simple joy in the child's voice began to crack something inside her, something that had been frozen solid with despair just hours ago. The kitchen filled with warm breakfast smells and the sizzle of pancakes on the griddle, Lily's endless stream of commentary created a strange bubble of normalcy that felt both comforting and surreal. Grace caught Ethan watching them, his expression unreadable as he flipped another pancake. "Look at this one." Lily pulled out a fresh drawing from her pile. "I made it last night after Mommy talked to me." The paper showed 3 figures standing under what appeared to be a rainbow. One was clearly meant to be an angel, complete with wings and a glowing circle above its head. Grace's hands trembled as she held the drawing. "That's you," Lily pointed to the angel figure. "And that's me and Daddy." She beamed up at Grace. "Do you like it?" The lump in Grace's throat grew larger. She stared at the childish drawing, at the simple lines that somehow held so much meaning. The angel in the picture looked happy, protected, wanted, everything she hadn't felt in so long. Ethan set a plate of steaming pancakes in the center of the table, then gently squeezed Lily's shoulder. "Time to clear the art gallery for breakfast, sweetheart." As Lily gathered her drawings, she left the angel picture in front of Grace. "You can keep this one," she said with a decisive nod. The 3 of them settled into an unusual breakfast, filled with moments of awkward silence broken by Lily's cheerful observations about everything from the shapes of her pancakes to the birds she could see through the window. Grace found herself smiling, despite herself, at the child's endless enthusiasm. Looking down at the drawing still beside her plate, Grace felt tears threatening to spill. She whispered, so quietly she thought no one could hear, "Maybe I was meant to stay." The afternoon light had softened, painting the living room walls in gentle amber hues. Ethan stood in the doorway, his heart catching at the sight before him. Lily sat cross-legged on the floor beside Grace, carefully turning the pages of a leather-bound journal. His wife's journal. "Look," Lily said, pointing to a page filled with her mother's flowing handwriting. "Mommy wrote lots of beautiful things." Grace's hands trembled as she looked up at Ethan, uncertainty in her eyes. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to pry. Lily wanted to show me—" "It's okay," Ethan said softly, moving into the room. He sat down in his old armchair, the leather creaking familiar beneath him. "Sarah, my wife, she liked to write. Said it helped her make sense of things." Lily nodded eagerly, her small finger tracing the words on the page. "This is my favorite part. Read it, Grace." Grace hesitated, her voice barely above a whisper as she read, "If you ever feel lost, look for the angel God sends." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Ethan watched as Grace's fingers brushed over the page, her eyes growing wet. "Your wife wrote this?" she asked. "Yeah." Ethan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Sarah wrote that during her last few months. The cancer." He paused, clearing his throat. It was rough, but she never lost her faith. Not once. Lily climbed onto the arm of his chair, wrapping her small arms around his neck. "Daddy was really brave," she said matter-of-factly. "He promised Mommy he'd take good care of me." Ethan hugged his daughter close, breathing in the sweet scent of her strawberry shampoo. "I made that promise the night before she passed. Sarah made me promise something else, too, to keep my heart open, no matter how hard things got." Grace closed the journal gently, laying it in her lap. "You've done an amazing job with Lily," she said. "I can see how much love there is in this home." "What about your son?" Lily asked innocently. "Does he have a daddy taking care of him?" Pain flashed across Grace's face, but she answered quietly, "He's with foster parents right now. Good people, I'm told, but—" She trailed off, twisting her hands in her lap. "You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to," Ethan said quickly. Grace shook her head. "No, I think I need to." She took a deep breath. "I was a nurse at Memorial Hospital for 6 years. Loved my job, loved my patients. But there was this doctor he didn't like having a black nurse correct his mistakes." Ethan felt his jaw tighten as Grace continued. "He started making complaints, saying I was incompetent, dangerous. Other nurses saw what was happening, but they were afraid to speak up. Then one day, a patient had a bad reaction to medication. Medication the doctor had prescribed wrong. But he blamed me. Said I administered the wrong dose." "That's not fair," Lily exclaimed, her face scrunching up in indignation. "No, sweetheart, it wasn't," Grace agreed softly. "I lost my job. Without income, fighting a legal battle." She pressed her lips together. "My ex-husband used it all against me in court. Said I was unstable, unfit, And just like that, they took my Caleb away. Ethan watched as she brushed away a tear. How long has it been? 3 months, Grace whispered. He's only 8. Every night, I wonder if he thinks I abandoned him. If he's scared. If he... Her voice broke. Lily slipped off the chair and went to Grace, wrapping her arms around her. Don't cry. Daddy always says there's light after the dark. Right, Daddy? Ethan nodded, his throat tight with emotion. That's right, baby. He met Grace's eyes. And sometimes that light comes from unexpected places. They sat in comfortable silence as the afternoon deepened into evening. Lily brought out her crayons, drawing picture after picture while Grace watched, occasionally offering suggestions or praise. Ethan ordered pizza, and they ate together in the living room, Lily telling stories that made Grace laugh despite herself. As night settled in, Ethan noticed Grace's eyes growing heavy. She had curled up on the couch, still holding Lily's latest drawing, an angel with dark skin wearing nurse's scrubs. Time for bed, Lily. Bug, Ethan said softly, noticing it was past 8. But I'm not tired, Lily protested through a yawn. Say goodnight to Grace. Lily patted over to the couch, giving Grace a gentle hug. Night, night. Don't worry about Caleb. Angels watch over him too. Thank you, sweetheart, Grace murmured, her voice thick with emotion. Ethan tucked Lily in, then returned downstairs to find Grace had drifted off to sleep, the drawing still clutched in her hands. In the soft lamplight, he could see the traces of tears on her cheeks, but her face was peaceful now. He grabbed the throw blanket from the back of the couch and carefully draped it over her. Standing there, watching her steady breathing, he whispered words he hadn't dared speak in years. Maybe you're the one we've been waiting for. Morning sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows, casting warm squares of light across the worn linoleum floor. Grace stood in the doorway, her overnight bag clutched tightly to her chest. She had changed back into yesterday's clothes, now wrinkled but clean. I should go, she said softly, though her feet remained rooted to the spot. I've imposed enough. Ethan looked up from the stove where he was flipping pancakes. His expression was gentle but firm. At least stay for breakfast. Lily would be heartbroken if you left without saying goodbye. As if on cue, Lily bounded into the kitchen, her school uniform slightly askew and her dark hair in messy braids. Miss Grace, you're still here. Her face lit up with pure joy. Grace's grip on her bag loosened slightly. I was just about to... Daddy makes the best chocolate chip pancakes on Tuesdays, Lily announced, pulling out a chair at the small kitchen table. She patted the seat next to her. This can be your spot. Ethan set 3 plates on the table, the pancakes steaming. Lily's right about the pancakes. Family recipe. Grace hesitated for a moment longer before setting her bag down by the door. She slid into the chair beside Lily, who beamed at her. We always say grace before eating, Lily explained, holding out her small hands. Will you join us? Before Grace could respond, Lily had already grabbed her hand and her father's, forming a circle around the table. Grace felt the warmth of their hands in hers, Lily's small fingers and Ethan's work-roughened palm. Lily bowed her head, her voice clear and sincere. Dear God, thank you for this yummy breakfast and for Daddy's special pancakes. And thank you most of all for sending Miss Grace to us. She's the angel Mommy told me about. I just know it. Please help her stay with us for a while. Amen. Grace blinked rapidly, fighting back tears. Ethan squeezed her hand gently before letting go, his own eyes suspiciously bright. As the morning progressed, Grace found herself falling into an easy rhythm with the small family. She helped Lily fix her braids while Ethan packed her lunch. When Lily discovered a torn seam in her uniform sweater, Grace found a sewing kit in her bag and mended it quickly. You're good at that, Ethan observed, watching her neat stitches. My grandmother taught me, Grace replied, her fingers working steadily. She said every skill is valuable, even the small ones. After Lily left for school, Grace insisted on helping with the dishes. As she dried each plate, she noticed the organized chaos of the kitchen. Permission slips magnetized to the fridge, Lily's artwork everywhere, a calendar packed with activities and appointments. Let me help, she found herself saying, just until I figure out my next steps. I can cook, clean, help with Lily. You don't have to earn your place here, Ethan interrupted gently. I need to do something, Grace insisted. I can't just exist. Ethan studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Okay. But you're not a maid, Grace. You're… He paused, searching for the right word. You're a guest, a friend. Throughout the day, Grace found small ways to help. She discovered a basket of unfolded laundry and methodically sorted it, creating neat piles of Lily's uniforms and Ethan's work clothes. She straightened the living room, dusted the photographs on the mantel, and even helped Lily with her math homework when she returned from school. You explain fractions better than Mrs. Peterson, Lily declared, hugging Grace impulsively. Ethan watched from the doorway as Grace showed Lily how to divide pizzas into equal shares, using drawings to make the concept clear. His expression was guarded, but there was something soft in his eyes. By evening, the house felt different. Dinner was a collaborative effort, with Grace teaching Lily how to make her grandmother's cornbread while Ethan handled the main course. The kitchen filled with warmth and laughter, and for a moment, Grace could almost forget the weight of her problems. After Lily went to bed, Grace joined Ethan at the kitchen sink. She picked up a dish towel without being asked, falling into step beside him as he washed. The only sounds were the quiet splash of water and the gentle clink of dishes. Outside, crickets chirped in the growing darkness. Grace felt a peculiar peace settle over her, different from the numbness that had consumed her on the bridge. I don't know why, she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. But for the first time in months, I don't feel invisible. Ethan's hands stilled in the soapy water. He didn't look at her, but she could see the muscles in his jaw working. There was understanding in his silence, and something more, something neither of them was ready to name. The dish towel in Grace's hands was damp and warm as she continued to dry the plates, letting the simple rhythm of the task ground her in this moment of unexpected belonging. The morning started like any other in the Cole household. Lily sat at the kitchen table, her cereal getting soggy as she chatted about her upcoming school day. Ethan stood by the counter, packing her lunch while occasionally glancing at Grace, who was helping herself to a second cup of coffee. The familiar rhythm of their morning routine shattered when the mail truck rumbled past. Lily bounced up from her chair, eager to help. I'll get it. She dashed outside, her ponytail swinging behind her. Grace wrapped her hands around her coffee mug, savoring its warmth. These past few days had given her a taste of what normal felt like again. The simple acts of making breakfast, folding laundry, and helping Lily with homework had started to heal something broken inside her. Lily burst back through the door, waving several envelopes. Bills! Bills! And she squinted at the last envelope. Something for Miss Grace. Grace's hands trembled as she took the official-looking envelope. The return address made her stomach drop. Department of Social Services. The coffee mug clattered against the table as she set it down. Everything okay? Ethan asked, his voice gentle. Grace's fingers shook so badly she could barely tear open the envelope. The paper inside felt heavy, official. Her eyes scanned the words, each one hitting her like a physical blow. It's about Caleb. Her voice cracked. They've scheduled a custody hearing. The kitchen grew quiet except for the soft ticking of the wall clock. Lily looked between the adults, sensing the tension. When? Ethan asked, moving closer. 2 weeks. Grace's vision blurred with tears. But it doesn't matter, I can't. She pressed her hand to her mouth, trying to hold back a sob. I don't have anything, no lawyer, no money, no job. They're going to take him away forever. Ethan pulled out the chair next to her and sat down. Hey, look at me. Grace kept her eyes fixed on the letter, the words swimming before her. Grace. His voice was firm, but kind. Look at me. She slowly raised her head, meeting his steady gaze. You're not doing this alone, he said. We'll figure it out together. You don't understand. Grace pushed back from the table, the chair legs scraping against the floor. I've already lost everything. My job, my reputation, my son. She paced the small kitchen, the letter crushed in her fist. They'll never believe me. They'll believe him my ex. He has money, connections. I'm just… She gestured helplessly. I'm nothing. That's not true, Lily's voice rang out, startling them both. You're smart and kind, and you make the best pancakes, and you helped me understand fractions." Her lower lip trembled. "Please don't say you're nothing." Grace stared at the little girl, her heart squeezing painfully in her chest. Here was this child, barely knowing her for 3 days, defending her with such fierce conviction. Ethan stood up, his expression determined. "Lily's right, and I know a lawyer, Dave Matthews. He helped me sort out Sarah's estate after. He swallowed hard, after she passed. He's good people. He'll at least talk to us, give us some options. I can't pay. We'll worry about that later." Ethan cut her off. "Right now, we focus on getting you ready for that hearing. You're a good mother, Grace. Anyone who spends 5 minutes with you can see that." Grace sank back into her chair, the fight draining out of her. "How can you be so sure? You barely know me." "I know enough." Ethan's voice was quiet but firm. "I know you were ready to give up everything because you thought your son would be better off. That's not someone who doesn't care. That's someone who loves so much it hurts." Lily slipped her small hand into Grace's. "And we'll help you. I can tell them how you helped me with my homework and made me soup when my tummy hurt yesterday." Grace looked at them both, this father and daughter who had quite literally saved her life on that bridge. They stood together, offering strength she didn't have, hope she'd lost, and something else she wasn't ready to name yet. "I'm scared," she whispered, finally voicing the truth that had been choking her for months. "What if we do all this and I still lose him?" "Then we'll face that together too," Ethan said simply. "But first, we fight." Lily squeezed her hand. "And Mommy always said fighting for love is never wrong." Grace's gaze moved between them, Ethan's steady presence, and Lily's innocent faith. For the first time in months, she felt a spark of something other than despair. But it terrified her, this fragile hope, because hope meant having something to lose again, and she wasn't sure her heart could survive another loss. The kitchen clock ticked steadily on the wall. Outside, birds sang their morning songs. The world kept turning, oblivious to the battle raging in Grace's heart. She looked down at the crumpled letter in her hand, then at these two people who had somehow become her anchor in the storm. "Okay," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Okay." Morning dew sparkled on the grass as Ethan's truck pulled away from the driveway. He had dropped Lily off at school early for her reading club, and now he and Grace were headed into town. The steering wheel felt cool under his hands as he navigated the quiet streets, occasionally stealing glances at Grace. She sat rigid in the passenger seat, clutching her purse like a shield. "Pastor Helen's been at First Methodist for over 30 years, Ethan said, trying to ease the tension. "She knows everyone in town, and she's helped lots of families through tough times." Grace nodded, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. She paused, swallowing hard. "I haven't been to church since everything happened. I stopped believing anyone would help." The old brick church came into view, its white steeple reaching toward the morning sky. A few early birds were already gathering for the morning prayer group, their cars dotting the parking lot. Ethan pulled into an empty spot near the side entrance. "Pastor Helen doesn't judge," he said softly. "She just helps." Inside, the church was quiet, except for the soft creak of wooden floors beneath their feet. The morning light filtered through stained glass windows, casting colorful shadows across the worn pews. Pastor Helen met them in her office, a cozy space filled with books and the smell of fresh coffee. "Grace," Pastor Helen said warmly, extending both hands to clasp Grace's. Her silver hair caught the light, and her kind eyes crinkled at the corners. "Ethan called me last night. I'm so glad you're here." Grace's shoulders relaxed slightly at the genuine welcome. Pastor Helen gestured for them to sit in the comfortable chairs facing her desk. "I've known Mr. Daniels for 20 years, Pastor Helen explained, picking up her phone. "He's helped many families in situations like yours. Would you mind if I called him now?" Grace nodded, her fingers twisting in her lap. Ethan reached over and gave her hand a gentle squeeze. Within 30 minutes, they were walking 2 blocks to a modest office building. Mr. Daniels's law practice occupied a small suite on the ground floor, with a simple brass plaque reading "Family Law" beside the door. The lawyer himself was older than Grace had expected, with salt and pepper hair and wire-rimmed glasses. His office was cluttered but organized, with neat stacks of papers and law books lining the walls. He listened intently as Grace told her story: the discrimination at work, the false accusations, the devastating loss of her nursing license, and finally, losing custody of her son. "They said I was unstable." Grace's voice cracked. "But I wasn't. I was just broken. They never gave me a chance to prove myself." Mr. Daniels leaned forward in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "Grace, the system isn't always fair, especially to mothers of color. But I've been doing this for 30 years, and I've learned that truth has a way of coming to light." He pulled out a legal pad. "If you're willing to fight this the right way, with dignity and honesty, I'll help you." "I don't have any money," Grace admitted, her cheeks flushing. Mr. Daniels waved his hand dismissively. "Pastor Helen vouched for you. That's enough for me." He began writing. "Now tell me everything, from the beginning. Don't leave anything out." For the next hour, Grace spoke, while Mr. Daniels took notes. Ethan sat quietly beside her, offering silent support. When she described the night on the bridge, her voice trembled, but she didn't stop. Mr. Daniels nodded encouragingly, his pen moving steadily across the paper. "You've been through hell," Mr. Daniels said when she finished, "but you're still standing. That says something about your character." He tapped his pen on the desk. "We'll need to prove you have stable housing, employment prospects, and a support system. Do you have anywhere to stay?" Before Grace could answer, Ethan cleared his throat. "She's staying with me and my daughter, as long as she needs to." Mr. Daniels raised an eyebrow, but nodded approvingly. "Good, that's a start. Now, about your nursing license." The morning stretched into afternoon as they discussed strategy and next steps. When they finally left Mr. Daniels's office, Grace felt lighter, as if sharing her burden had physically lifted some of its weight. Back at Ethan's house, they found Lily already home from school, working on homework at the kitchen table. She jumped up when they entered, her face bright with curiosity. "Did you find someone to help?" she asked, hugging her father's waist. Ethan guided them all to sit at the table. Grace's hands shook slightly as she faced Lily's innocent expression. "Lily," Grace began softly, "I need to tell you something important. You know how you live here with your daddy because your mommy is in heaven?" Lily nodded solemnly. "Well, I have a little boy. His name is Caleb, but right now, he can't live with me. I'm going to try very hard to bring him home, just like your daddy takes care of you." Lily's eyes widened with understanding. "Is that why you were so sad?" Grace nodded, tears threatening to spill. "Yes, sweetie. That's why I was so sad." Lily reached across the table and took Grace's hand in her small one. "Then I'll pray for him too. Every night, just like I pray for my mommy in heaven." Grace's tears fell freely now, but they weren't tears of despair anymore. Ethan watched his daughter comfort Grace, amazed at how naturally love flowed from such a young heart. "Thank you, Lily," Grace whispered, squeezing the little girl's hand. "Your prayers mean more than you know." Grace sat cross-legged on the living room floor, surrounded by stacks of papers. Her hands trembled as she sorted through old pay stubs from the hospital, certificates of achievement, and letters of recommendation from former patients. Each document told a piece of her story, a story she needed to prove she was worthy of being a mother again. "Here's another folder," Ethan said softly, setting down a box beside her. He lowered himself to sit on the carpet, careful not to disturb the organized piles she'd created. Grace picked up a wrinkled envelope, its edges worn from being carried in her purse for months. Inside was a photo of her son Caleb, his gap-toothed smile beaming at the camera. It was taken on his last birthday before everything fell apart. Her vision blurred with tears. "Hey," Ethan said gently, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. "Take a breath. We've got this." Grace wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I keep thinking about all the moments I've missed. His first loose tooth, the science fair he was so excited about." "Those memories matter," Ethan said, helping her sort through more papers. "But there are so many more moments ahead. Mr. Daniels seemed confident about your case." They worked in comfortable silence, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the carpet. Grace found herself drawing strength from Ethan's quiet presence, his methodical way of helping her organize everything into neat, labeled piles. The front door burst open with the energy only a 10-year-old could possess. Lily bounded in, her backpack bouncing against her back. "Miss Grace! Dad, I got an A on my spelling test." "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Grace said, managing a genuine smile despite her emotional state. "Your hard work paid off." Lily dropped her backpack and plopped down between them, examining the papers with curiosity. Her eyes landed on the photo of Caleb, and she picked it up carefully. "Is this your little boy?" Grace nodded, her throat tight. "Yes, that's Caleb. He's 8. He has your smile," Lily observed, studying the picture. Then, with the beautiful innocence of childhood, she asked, "Does he like pancakes too? Because Dad makes the best pancakes in the whole world, especially with chocolate chips." The question hit Grace like a wave. Memories flooded back Sunday mornings with Caleb, making Mickey Mouse-shaped pancakes, his laughter when the ears came out crooked. A sob caught in her throat. "Oh, honey," she managed. "Yes, he loves pancakes, especially with strawberries on top?" Lily guessed excitedly. Grace let out a watery laugh. "Actually, yes. How did you know?" "Because that's how I like them too," Lily beamed, then her expression grew serious. "Don't cry, Miss Grace. When he comes back, we can all have pancakes together." Ethan wrapped an arm around Grace's shoulders as tears spilled down her cheeks. "Love is stronger than fear," he murmured, echoing the words Pastor Helen had shared earlier. "And right now, there's more love in this room than fear." Lily wedged herself between them, wrapping her small arms around Grace's waist. "Daddy always says that hugs make everything better, and when Mommy died, he said that even when we can't see the people we love, they're still in our hearts." Grace held the little girl close, amazed at how this child could cut straight through to the truth with such simple wisdom. "Your daddy is very smart," she whispered. "How about we take a break?" Ethan suggested, giving Grace's shoulder a gentle squeeze. "I think we could all use some dinner." In the kitchen, they fell into an easy rhythm. Ethan started browning ground beef for tacos, while Grace chopped vegetables. Lily set the table, carefully arranging 3 plates, just like a fancy restaurant, as she proclaimed. The simple act of preparing food together seemed to lift the heavy cloud that had settled over Grace. She found herself smiling as Lily told animated stories about her day at school, complete with dramatic hand gestures that nearly knocked over the salt shaker. And then Tommy put his pet frog in Sarah's desk. Lily giggled, passing Grace the lettuce. "You should have seen Mrs. Thompson's face." "Lily Cole," Ethan said in mock sternness, "you better not get any ideas about bringing frogs to school." "Of course not, Daddy," Lily said with angelic innocence. "I like butterflies better anyway." Grace couldn't help but laugh, the sound surprising her with its freedom. When was the last time she had laughed like this? The kitchen filled with warmth and the smell of seasoned meat and fresh tortillas. They gathered around the table, passing dishes back and forth. Lily insisted on saying grace, thanking God for tacos and family and Miss Grace and her little boy who likes strawberry pancakes. The simple prayer brought fresh tears to Grace's eyes, but these were different tears of gratitude rather than despair. As she watched Ethan help Lily build her taco, showing her how to keep the shell from breaking, she felt something shift inside her heart. This wasn't just a temporary shelter anymore, this was becoming home. Laughter echoed off the walls as Lily told more school stories, as Ethan shared funny moments from the diner, as Grace remembered happier times with Caleb. The house seemed to come alive with their joy, as if it had been waiting for this moment. Between bites, Grace caught Ethan's eye across the table. His smile was gentle, understanding. In that moment, she saw what he must have been like before. Loss carved its marks into his heart, and maybe, just maybe, what he could be again. The morning sunlight streamed through the courthouse's tall windows, casting long shadows across the marble floor. Grace Miller stood at the entrance, her navy blue dress smoothed countless times by nervous hands. Beside her, Ethan Cole offered a reassuring presence, while Mr. Daniels adjusted his tie and briefcase. "Remember what we practiced, Mr. Daniels said softly. "Just be honest and speak from your heart." Grace nodded, but her throat felt too tight for words. The courthouse seemed to tower over her, its stone walls a reminder of all the institutions that had already judged her unworthy. She clutched her folder of documents closer to her chest. "You've got this," Ethan whispered, giving her elbow a gentle squeeze. They made their way through security and up to the third floor. The hallway stretched before them, their footsteps echoing against the polished floors. Outside courtroom 3B, other families waited on wooden benches, their faces carrying similar weights of worry and hope. When they entered the courtroom, Grace's eyes immediately found her ex-husband's lawyer, Miss Patterson, arranging papers at her table. The woman's crisp suit and confident demeanor made Grace feel small in comparison. "All rise," the bailiff called as Judge Martinez entered. Grace stood on shaking legs, trying to remember to breathe. The proceedings began with Miss Patterson painting a harsh picture of Grace. "Your Honor, Miss Miller has demonstrated a pattern of instability. After losing her nursing position, she failed to maintain steady employment. Her emotional state has been questionable at best." Grace felt each word like a physical blow. Mr. Daniels had warned her this would happen, but hearing herself described this way still hurt. When it was her turn to speak, Grace approached the stand. Her voice quivered as she described her years as a dedicated nurse, the discrimination she'd faced, and her desperate fight to keep her son. "I never stopped loving Caleb," she said, tears threatening to spill. "Every decision I made was to give him a better life." But Miss Patterson's cross-examination was brutal. "Where have you been living these past weeks, Miss Miller?" With friends who took me in." "You mean with a man you barely know and his young daughter?" Miss Patterson's tone dripped with judgment. "Is this the kind of unstable environment you think suitable for your son?" Grace's words failed her. The room seemed to spin, and she could barely hear Mr. Daniels's objection over the rushing in her ears. That's when Ethan stood up. "Your Honor, I'd like to speak, if I may." The judge considered him for a moment, then nodded. "Approach the stand, Mr. Cole." Ethan walked forward, his usual quiet confidence carrying him. He looked directly at the judge as he spoke. "I'm a widowed father of a 10-year-old girl. When I found Grace that night, she wasn't unstable, she was broken, like I was when I lost my wife." The courtroom fell silent. Even Miss Patterson stopped shuffling her papers. "In the weeks she's stayed with us, I've watched her help my daughter with homework, cook meals that made us forget our grief, and pray every night for her son. She's brought laughter back into our home." Ethan's voice grew stronger. "My little girl used to cry herself to sleep, but now she smiles again, because of Grace." He turned slightly, meeting Grace's tear-filled eyes. "Grace Miller isn't unstable. She's one of the strongest people I know. She's faced discrimination, loss, and heartbreak, but she never stopped fighting for her son. That's not instability. That's love." Judge Martinez leaned forward, studying both Grace and Ethan carefully. After what felt like an eternity, she spoke. "Miss Miller, while I have concerns about your recent circumstances, I also see a mother who refuses to give up on her child. Mr. Cole's testimony speaks to your character in a way your documentation alone could not." Grace held her breath as the judge continued. "I'm granting supervised visitation rights, twice a week, with potential for expanded privileges based on consistent positive reports." Judge Martinez's voice softened slightly. "Miss Miller, this is your chance to prove yourself. Don't waste it." Grace's legs gave out and she sank into her chair, tears flowing freely now. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much." Mr. Daniels squeezed her shoulder, while Ethan reached across to steady her trembling hands. Through her tears, she could see her first chance to hold her little boy again, just days away. After months of darkness, this small ray of light felt like dawn breaking through the longest night. The judge's gavel struck, making it official. "Court is adjourned. Mr. Daniels, please work with Child Services to arrange the first supervised visit." Grace hardly heard the rest, her heart too full of gratitude and hope. She would see her son again. She could hold him, hear his voice, tell him how much she loved him. It wasn't everything, not yet, but it was a beginning. Saturday morning arrived with gentle warmth, the kind that made the dew sparkle on grass blades in Henderson Park. Grace perched on the edge of a weathered wooden bench, her cotton sundress pressed smooth against her legs. Every few seconds she checked her watch, though she knew she was 30 minutes early for the scheduled visit. The playground equipment cast long shadows across the dewy grass. A red cardinal swooped between trees, its bright feathers catching the morning light. Grace's hands trembled as she arranged and rearranged the small picnic basket beside her, packed with Caleb's favorite peanut butter and honey sandwiches cut into dinosaur shapes. Ethan and Lily settled on a distant bench, giving Grace the space she needed while still offering silent support. Lily swung her legs, occasionally waving at Grace with an encouraging smile. At exactly 10 a.m., a blue sedan pulled into the parking lot. Grace's heart leaped into her throat as she recognized Miss Peterson, the caseworker, stepping out. But it was the small figure who emerged from the back seat that made tears spring to her eyes. "Mommy!" Caleb's voice rang across the park as he broke free from Miss Peterson's gentle hold. His Spider-Man sneakers pounded against the sidewalk as he ran, his Pokémon backpack bouncing with each step. Grace dropped to her knees, arms wide open. Caleb crashed into her embrace, his small arms wrapping around her neck so tightly she could barely breathe. She didn't care. The scent of his baby shampoo filled her nose as she pressed her face into his dark curls. "My baby," she whispered, rocking him gently. "My sweet, sweet boy." Caleb pulled back just enough to study her face with serious brown eyes. His small hands touched her cheeks, wiping away tears she hadn't realized were falling. "Don't cry, Mommy. I'm here now." Grace laughed softly, the sound catching in her throat. "These are happy tears, sweetheart. I've missed you so much." Miss Peterson approached with a clipboard, her sensible shoes crunching on the gravel path. "I'll be right over there," she gestured to a nearby bench. "You have 2 hours." Grace nodded, already turning her attention back to Caleb. He was taller than she remembered, his face a little less round. 7 months felt like an eternity when measuring it in a child's growth. "I brought your favorite," Grace said, reaching for the picnic basket. "Want to have a picnic?" Caleb's eyes lit up as she spread out the checkered blanket on the grass. "Did you make them into shapes?" "Of course." Grace pulled out the sandwich, wrapped carefully in wax paper. "What kind of mommy would I be if I forgot the dinosaur shapes?" They settled on the blanket, Caleb cross-legged and Grace tucking her dress around her knees. He took big bites of his sandwich, telling her between mouthfuls about his foster home, his new school, and the library books he'd been reading. "And I drew you pictures," he said, reaching for his backpack. "Mrs. Martinez helped me save them all." Grace's heart squeezed as Caleb pulled out a thick folder of artwork. Each page showed bright yellow suns, stick figures holding hands, and houses with smoking chimneys. "They're beautiful, baby, just like you." After lunch, Caleb spotted the playground. "Can we play catch?" He pointed to the open grass area. Grace pulled out the soft baseball she'd bought especially for today. They tossed it back and forth, Caleb's giggles floating on the breeze every time he caught it. His coordination had improved, Grace noticed, pride mixing with sadness at having missed watching him learn. "Who's that?" Caleb asked during a break, pointing toward where Ethan and Lily Saturday. "That's my friend Ethan, and his daughter, Lily," Grace explained. "They've been very kind to me." Caleb watched them for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "Lily waves at me sometimes. She looks nice." "She is nice. Would you like to meet them?" Caleb shook his head, pressing closer to Grace's side. "Not today, just want you, Mommy." They spent the rest of their time exploring the playground. Grace pushed him on the swings, her heart soaring with each of his delighted squeals. They found roly-poly bugs under rocks and made up stories about cloud shapes in the sky. As the afternoon light began to soften, Miss Peterson stood up, signaling their time was almost over. Grace's chest tightened, but she kept her voice steady as she led Caleb back to their blanket. "Sweetheart," she said, taking his small hands in hers, "I need you to know something very important." Caleb looked up at her, his eyes wide and trusting. "I'm fighting for you," Grace continued. "I'm doing everything I can to bring you home. I promise I won't stop until we're together again." "Promise, promise?" Caleb asked, using their old way of making extra special promises. "Promise, promise," Grace replied, touching her heart like they used to do. Miss Peterson approached, her clipboard tucked under her arm. "Time to go, Caleb." Caleb's lower lip trembled as he threw himself into Grace's arms. "Don't let go again, Mommy," he whispered against her neck, his voice small and pleading. Grace held him close, memorizing the weight of him in her arms, the texture of his hair against her cheek, the way his small chest rose and fell against hers. She couldn't speak past the lump in her throat, so she just squeezed him tighter, pouring all her love into that embrace. When Miss Peterson gently touched Caleb's shoulder, Grace forced herself to loosen her hold. Caleb picked up his backpack, now filled with the remains of their picnic and new memories to take with him. "I love you to the moon and back," Grace managed to say, their special goodbye that had started when Caleb first learned about space in preschool. "And to all the stars, too," Caleb finished, giving her one last quick hug before taking Miss Peterson's hand. Grace stayed rooted to the spot, watching until the blue sedan disappeared around the corner. Only then did she allow her shoulders to shake with silent sobs, her arms aching with emptiness. A small hand slipped into hers. Grace looked down to find Lily standing beside her, offering a tissue and understanding far beyond her years. Behind her, Ethan stood quietly, his presence steady and reassuring. "He's beautiful," Lily said simply, squeezing Grace's hand. Grace squeezed back, drawing strength from this unexpected family that had found her when she needed them most. In her heart, she made a silent vow to her son. Nothing would stop her from bringing him home. The week unfolded like pages in a storybook, each day bringing new moments of joy and healing. Grace's supervised visits with Caleb took place in Henderson Park, where the old oak trees provided shade from the late summer Sunday. The social worker, Miss Thompson, kept a respectful distance while maintaining her watchful presence. During their second visit, Caleb brought his favorite dinosaur book, the corners worn from countless readings. His small fingers traced the colorful illustrations as he sat in Grace's lap, his voice animated as he shared facts about velociraptors and T-Rexes. Grace breathed in his familiar scent, a mix of soap and sunshine, and fought back happy tears. "Mommy, did you know T-Rex teeth were as big as bananas?" Caleb asked, his eyes wide with wonder. "Really? That's amazing, sweetheart," Grace replied, savoring every word from his mouth. On their third visit, Ethan brought Lily to the park. She approached cautiously at first, hiding partially behind her father's leg. But Caleb's friendly smile and shared interest in drawing quickly broke the ice. "Want to see my dinosaur drawings?" Caleb asked, pulling out his sketchbook. Lily's face lit up. "I love drawing too. Dad, can I show him my butterfly pictures?" Soon, both children sat cross-legged on a checkered blanket, their heads bent together over their artwork. Colored pencils scattered between them like pickup sticks, and their laughter carried across the park. Grace watched them from her spot on the bench, her heart so full it ached. Ethan settled beside her, their shoulders barely touching. "Look at them," he said softly. "They're like old friends already." "Children have such open hearts," Grace replied, watching as Lily taught Caleb how to draw flower petals. Back at Ethan's house, the days took on a gentle rhythm. Grace found herself staying later each evening, helping with dinner, or reading stories to Lily. The kitchen became a warm sanctuary where they'd share coffee in the mornings, Grace arriving early before her shift at the new clinic where she'd found work. One morning, as sunlight streamed through the window, Ethan watched Grace stir honey into her coffee. Her movements were more relaxed now, the haunted look in her eyes slowly fading. "You're different," he said, then quickly added, "in a good way, more present." Grace smiled, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. "Having Caleb back in my life, even just for visits, it's like the world has color again." Late-night conversations became their private ritual. After Lily went to bed, they'd sit on the porch swing, talking about everything and nothing. Grace shared stories about Caleb's first steps, his early fascination with dinosaurs, the way he'd sing himself to sleep. Ethan spoke about his late wife Sarah, memories that had been too painful to voice before. "She would have loved seeing Lily like this," Ethan said one evening, watching through the window as their children played board games in the living room. "So happy, so complete." Grace understood the weight of those words. She watched Caleb help Lily set up the game pieces, his careful movements so like his father's precision. They bring out the best in each other. The house felt different now, warmer, fuller. Drawings covered the refrigerator door, Caleb's dinosaurs alongside Lily's butterflies. Their backpacks sat side by side in the entryway. The sound of children's laughter echoed through rooms that had known too much silence. One evening, after a particularly joyful day of board games and homemade pizza, Grace tucked both children into bed. Lily had insisted on sharing her room with Caleb for his overnight visit, approved by the social worker. They'd set up sleeping bags on the floor, making it feel like a proper sleepover. "Good night, my sweet ones," Grace whispered, turning on the star-shaped nightlight. She found Ethan in the kitchen, putting away the last of the dishes. The domesticity of the scene struck her. How natural it felt, how right. He turned to her with a soft smile that made her heart skip. "They're finally asleep?" he asked, drying his hands on a dish towel. Out like lights, all that giggling wore them out. They stood in comfortable silence. The only sound, the gentle hum of the refrigerator, and the distant chorus of crickets through the open window. Ethan took a step closer, his expression tender and uncertain. "Grace, he started, then paused, running a hand through his hair. The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken words. Finally, he shook his head slightly and whispered, "Not yet." Grace understood. They both carried too much history, too much responsibility to rush into anything. For now, this gentle friendship, this growing family bond, was enough. She smiled and picked up another dish towel, helping him finish the evening chores in companionable silence. The peace of the moment settled around them like a warm blanket. The sleeping children upstairs, the quiet house, and the promise of tomorrow, hanging sweet in the air. The morning started like any other. Grace hummed softly while making pancakes, her hands steady now as she poured the batter into perfect circles. Lily sat at the kitchen table, coloring a picture of what looked like 4 stick figures holding hands, herself, her dad, Grace, and Caleb. The sharp buzz of Grace's phone cut through the peaceful scene. She wiped her hands on her apron and picked it up, expecting another encouraging message from Mr. Daniels about the upcoming custody hearing. Instead, her fingers trembled as she read the text from Marcus. "You really think you can play house with some stranger and his kid? I'll make sure you never see Caleb again. Watch me." The phone slipped from her grasp, clattering onto the counter. Lily looked up, concerned. "Miss Grace, are you okay?" Grace forced a smile. "Just fine, sweetie. Your pancakes are almost ready." But her hands shook as she flipped the pancakes, Marcus's words echoing in her mind. She jumped when Ethan entered the kitchen, his work uniform already on for his morning shift at the diner. "Something's wrong," he said immediately, noting her pale face. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed again. And again. More messages from Marcus, each one more threatening than the last. Ethan gently took the phone from her trembling hands and read them, his jaw tightening. "He can't do this," Ethan said firmly, but Grace saw the worry in his eyes. Within days, Marcus's threats became reality. "Mr. Daniels called with grave news. Marcus had filed new complaints with family court, painting Grace as mentally unstable and accusing her of engaging in an inappropriate relationship with a man she barely knew. Worse, he'd somehow discovered Grace's suicide attempt at the bridge. "He's claiming you're a danger to Caleb," Mr. Daniels explained gently. "And he's questioning Mr. Cole's judgment in having you around his daughter." Grace sat heavily on Ethan's couch, her world spinning. "What are you saying?" "Child Services will need to investigate. Both cases, yours and Mr. Cole's." The whispers started in their small town. Grace noticed the stares at the grocery store, the way other parents pulled their children closer at the park. Someone had anonymously reported Ethan to Child Services, suggesting he was housing an unstable woman with his young daughter. One afternoon, Grace overheard 2 women at the diner where Ethan worked. "Can you believe he let that woman move in? After what happened to his poor wife? And with his daughter there? Someone should do something." Grace fled before they could see her, tears burning her eyes. That evening, After Lily was asleep, Grace found Ethan sitting at the kitchen table, holding a formal letter from Child Services. His hands were shaking slightly, the first time she'd ever seen him truly afraid. "They want to evaluate my fitness as a parent," he said quietly. "Because of my questionable judgment in helping you." Grace's chest tightened with guilt. "Ethan, I'm so sorry. I never meant—" "Don't," he interrupted, standing up. "This isn't your fault. Marcus is the one, but it is my fault." Grace wrapped her arms around herself. "I brought this chaos into your life, into Lily's life. You were healing, you were happy, and we were existing," Ethan corrected her softly. "You brought life back into this house, hope," but Grace couldn't bear the kindness in his voice. She paced the kitchen, Marcus's threats playing on repeat in her mind. "He won't stop. He'll keep coming after us, after you, until—" She trailed off, remembering Lily's innocent face, her drawings of angels, her prayers at bedtime. The thought of that little girl being taken from her father because of her, it was unbearable. That night, after Ethan had gone to bed, Grace quietly packed her small bag. She wrote a note, explaining that she had to protect them, that she couldn't be the reason Lily lost her father. Her tears smudged the ink as she wrote how much these weeks with them had meant to her, how they'd saved her life in more ways than one. She tiptoed to Lily's room, watching the little girl sleep peacefully. "I'm sorry, Angel," she whispered. Finally, she stood in the hallway outside Ethan's door, her heart breaking. She could hear his steady breathing through the partially open door. Clutching her bag, she whispered into the darkness, "I won't let you lose your daughter because of me." She turned toward the front door, her footsteps silent on the carpet, carrying the weight of another goodbye she never wanted to say. The morning sunlight crept through Ethan's bedroom window, casting long shadows across the floor. Something felt wrong. The house was too quiet. No smell of coffee brewing. No gentle humming from the kitchen. His heart skipped a beat as he rushed downstairs. "Grace?" His voice echoed through the empty rooms. The kitchen stood silent. No breakfast preparations, no morning chatter, just a folded piece of paper on the counter. His hands trembled as he picked it up, reading Grace's hurried handwriting. "I'm so sorry. I can't let Marcus destroy your family, too. Thank you for showing me kindness when I needed it most. Please tell Lily I'll never forget her." A small sob from the doorway made him turn. Lily stood there in her pink pajamas, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "Daddy, where's Miss Grace?" "Sweetheart." He opened his arms, and she ran into them. Grace had to go away for a little while. "But why?" Lily's voice cracked. "She's our angel. Mommy said so." Tears rolled down her cheeks as she buried her face in his shirt. "Did I do something wrong?" "No, baby. You didn't do anything wrong." Ethan stroked her hair, fighting back his own emotions. Sometimes grown-ups make hard choices to protect the people they love. Lily pulled away, her face red and tear-stained. "But who's going to protect Miss Grace?" The question hit him like a punch to the gut. He grabbed his keys and phone, determination setting in. "Mrs. Peterson next door will watch you for a bit. I'm going to look for her." Ethan drove through the quiet streets of their small town, checking every place he could think of. The diner where they'd first talked, the park where Grace had reunited with Caleb, the church where Pastor Helen had helped them find a lawyer. Each stop yielded nothing but worried looks and sympathetic headshakes. The morning stretched into afternoon. He called Mr. Daniels, their lawyer, but Grace hadn't contacted him either. Rain began to fall, matching his darkening mood. Meanwhile, in a small motel on the outskirts of town, Grace sat on the edge of a squeaky bed staring at her phone. 17 missed calls from Ethan. 5 text messages. She couldn't bring herself to read them. The room was shabby peeling wallpaper, a flickering fluorescent light, and a musty smell that spoke of too many lonely souls passing through. But it felt right somehow. This was what she deserved, wasn't it? She pulled Caleb's drawing from her bag, a bright yellow sun with uneven rays, colored with the fierce determination only a 7-year-old could muster. He'd given it to her during their last supervised visit, proudly explaining how he'd made the sun extra big because it has to shine for both of us, Mommy. A sob escaped her throat. She'd promised him she wouldn't let go again, and here she was, running away. But what choice did she have? Marcus's threats echoed in her mind. "I'll make sure everyone sees what a mess you are. Your son, that widower, his kid, they'll all pay for your mistakes." The afternoon light faded into evening. Grace paced the small room, her mind replaying every moment with Ethan and Lily. The way Lily's eyes lit up when they baked cookies together. How Ethan's quiet strength had anchored her when everything felt impossible. The sound of laughter filling a home she'd started to think of as her own. But those memories only twisted the knife deeper. She'd brought chaos into their peaceful life. Marcus would use Ethan's kindness against him, paint their friendship as something inappropriate. He'd already started spreading rumors that could threaten Ethan's custody of Lily. Grace sank onto the bed again, pulling her knees to her chest. The room's silence pressed in around her, broken only by the occasional passing car and the steady drip of a leaky faucet. This was familiar territory, being alone, being unwanted. Hadn't that been her life before the bridge? Before Ethan? She reached for Caleb's drawing again, tracing the wobbly sun rays with her finger. "Maybe they're better off without me," she whispered to the empty room. The words tasted bitter, like surrender. But wasn't that what love sometimes meant? Stepping away to protect those who matter most? Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing away her footprints from the morning's escape. In the growing darkness, Grace sat alone with her choice, clutching a child's drawing of the sun while shadows gathered in every corner. The motel room's clock ticked steadily, marking each moment of her self-imposed exile. She thought of Lily waking up tomorrow, looking for her angel, of Ethan making breakfast alone again, of Caleb waiting for a mother who seemed destined to keep disappointing him. Grace pressed the drawing to her chest and closed her eyes, letting the tears fall freely now. The darkness outside matched the storm in her heart, where hope and fear waged a silent war, and love felt like both a blessing and a curse. Grace wandered the empty streets as morning fog rolled in, her shoes scuffing against the cracked sidewalk. Her chest felt hollow, each breath a reminder of what she'd left behind. The small motel room had become suffocating, forcing her out into the gray dawn. A church bell chimed in the distance. Grace looked up to see the weathered stone facade of St. Michael's, its wooden doors propped open despite the early hour. Without thinking, her feet carried her toward the entrance. The interior was dim, lit only by scattered candles and what little morning light filtered through the stained glass windows. Empty pews stretched before her, their wood worn smooth by decades of faithful congregants. Grace slipped into the last row, hoping to remain unseen. An elderly man sat a few rows ahead, his silver hair neat despite his wrinkled clothes. He turned at the sound of her footsteps, offering a gentle smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Good morning," he said softly. "I'm Arthur Harris. Most folks just call me Mr. Harris." Grace managed a weak nod. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to disturb you." "No disturbance at all." Mr. Harris shifted to face her better, his movements careful and deliberate. "I come here most mornings, sometimes to pray, sometimes just to remember." Something in his voice made Grace pause. The weight of experience hung heavy in his words, like someone who had walked through fire and lived to tell about it. She found herself asking, "Remember what?" Mr. Harris's eyes grew distant. "The ones I lost, the ones I couldn't save." He touched the silver cross hanging from his neck. "I served in Vietnam. Lost my whole unit one night in '68. For years after, I blamed myself for surviving when they didn't." Grace's throat tightened. Here was someone who understood the crushing weight of guilt, the burden of being left behind while others suffered. "How?" she swallowed hard. "How did you keep going?" "I didn't, at first." Mr. Harris's voice was gentle but firm. "I tried to disappear into a bottle, pushed away everyone who cared. Convinced myself the world would be better off without me." He paused, his weathered hands folded in his lap. "Sound familiar?" Grace felt tears burning behind her eyes. "Maybe. Then let me tell you what saved me." Mr. Harris turned fully toward her. "One morning, much like this one, I stumbled into this very church. I was at my lowest point, ready to give up completely. But an old pastor was here, and he said something I've never forgotten. The darkest night always gives way to dawn. Grace's breath caught. Ethan's words from the bridge echoed in her mind, striking her like physical blows. It wasn't just words, Mr. Harris continued. He showed me that my survival wasn't a curse. It was a responsibility. Every breath I took was a chance to honor those I'd lost by living fully, by helping others find their way through the dark. But what if? Grace's voice cracked. What if helping others only brings them pain? What if everything you touch falls apart? Mr. Harris's eyes softened with understanding. That's fear talking, dear. Fear lies to us. It tells us we're poison when we're really medicine. It tells us to run when we should stand firm. Grace thought of Lily's innocent face, of Ethan's steady presence, of Caleb's arms around her neck in the park. The tears she'd been holding back began to fall. You know what I learned? Mr. Harris reached over and patted her hand. Running away doesn't protect anyone. It just leaves two sets of wounds. Yours and theirs. I left them this morning, Grace whispered, the confession spilling out. A good man and his daughter who took me in when I was ready to. She couldn't finish the sentence. And now you're here, which means part of you knows it was a mistake. Mr. Harris's voice grew stronger. God doesn't bring people into our lives by accident. Sometimes our greatest act of faith is simply staying put, fighting through the storm instead of running from it. Sunlight began to stream through the stained glass windows, casting colored patterns across the wooden pews. Grace watched as reds and blues danced across her hands, remembering how those same hands had helped Lily with homework, had held Caleb in the park, had been steadied by Ethan's touch. I'm scared, she admitted. Of course you are. Mr. Harris nodded. Courage isn't about not being scared. It's about being scared and doing what's right anyway. My ex-husband. He's threatening to take everything away. Not just my son, but he could hurt them too, Ethan and Lily. I can't let that happen. And you think disappearing protects them? Mr. Harris asked gently. Or does it just leave them vulnerable and heartbroken? Grace sat in silence, letting his words sink in. The morning light grew stronger, warming her face through the windows. She thought of Ethan pulling her back from the bridge, of Lily calling her an angel, of all the small moments of healing they'd shared. The darkness always feels strongest just before dawn, Mr. Harris said, standing slowly. But dawn comes, dear. It always comes. He touched her shoulder lightly. The question is, will you be there to see it? Grace looked up at him, seeing decades of hard-won wisdom in his kind eyes. She thought of Caleb's words in the park. Don't let go again, Mommy. She had made a promise then. Running away would break it. The morning sun had fully risen now, flooding the church with golden light. Grace stood, her legs steady beneath her for the first time since receiving Marcus's threat. Thank you, she said to Mr. Harris. He smiled, touching his silver cross. Don't thank me. Just promise you'll face the dawn, standing tall. Grace nodded, squaring her shoulders as she turned toward the church doors. The morning light streamed through them, bright and clear, showing her the path home. The morning sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows, casting long shadows across the breakfast table. Ethan stirred his coffee absently, the dark circles under his eyes betraying a sleepless night. Beside him, Lily pushed her untouched cereal around the bowl, her usual morning chatter replaced by heavy silence. Daddy, Lily's small voice cracked. Will we ever see Miss Grace again? Ethan's heart clenched at the hope in his daughter's eyes. I don't know, sweetheart. Sometimes people need time to... A soft knock at the front door cut through his words. Lily's spoon clattered against the bowl as she jumped up, her chair scraping against the floor. Before Ethan could react, his daughter was already running toward the sound. When the door swung open, Grace stood there, her eyes red-rimmed but clear. She wore the same clothes as yesterday, slightly rumpled from her night away. Her hands fidgeted with the strap of her worn shoulder bag. Miss Grace! Lily launched herself forward, wrapping her arms around Grace's waist. You came back! Grace's composure crumbled as she knelt down, gathering Lily in a proper hug. I'm so sorry, sweetie. I shouldn't have left like that. Ethan approached slowly, his emotions warring between relief and caution. He'd seen too many people walk away from Lily's life. Yet something in Grace's expression was different, steadier, more resolved. "I met someone at the church this morning," Grace said, standing up with Lily, still clinging to her side. "An elderly veteran named Mr. Harris. He told me about losing his entire family in a house fire decades ago." Ethan gestured toward the kitchen, and they moved inside. Grace settled into her usual chair, the one that had somehow become hers over these past weeks. Lily refused to let go, climbing onto her lap. "Mr. Harris said he almost gave up too," Grace continued, running her fingers through Lily's tangled morning hair. "But he learned that running from pain only makes the darkness follow you. He told me that true strength isn't about facing things alone. It's about letting others help carry your burden." "He sounds wise," Ethan said softly, sliding a fresh cup of coffee across the table to her. Grace wrapped her hands around the warm mug. "He said something that reminded me of you, Ethan, about the darkest night always giving way to dawn. But he added that sometimes we need others to help us keep watch until morning comes." Ethan's throat tightened. Those were almost the exact words he'd spoken to her on the bridge that first night. "Grace, I was wrong to leave," she interrupted, her voice stronger now. "I thought I was protecting you both, but I was really just afraid. Afraid of hoping, afraid of letting anyone else get hurt because of me." She met Ethan's gaze directly. "But I'm done running. If you'll still have me here, I want to fight. For Caleb. For this." She glanced around the kitchen, at the drawings on the fridge, at Lily in her arms. "For everything." Ethan reached across the table, covering her hand with his. "I was scared too," he admitted. "When I found your note, I thought." He swallowed hard. "I've gotten used to having you here, both of us have. And the thought of going back to how things were before." "Can Miss Grace stay forever?" Lily piped up, looking between them with hopeful eyes. Grace hugged her closer. "I'd like to stay, if that's okay. At least until we figure things out with the trial. I promise I won't run again, no matter what Marcus tries to do." "We'll face him together," Ethan said firmly. "Your ex-husband, the courts, the rumors, all of it. You're not alone anymore, Grace." Tears spilled down Grace's cheeks, but her smile was genuine. "Thank you, both of you. You've given me so much more than just a place to stay. You've given me back my hope." "Group hug," Lily declared, reaching for her father's hand and pulling him closer. They ended up in an awkward embrace over the kitchen table, coffee cups wobbling dangerously, but none of them cared. Later that evening, the kitchen filled with the warm aroma of Grace's cooking, a simple pasta dish that had become one of their favorites. Lily helped set the table, chattering about her plans to make welcome-back cards for both Grace and Caleb. As they sat down to eat, the atmosphere was different from their previous meals together. There was a new understanding, a deeper connection forged through fear and forgiveness. Grace served the pasta while Ethan cut fresh bread, their movements in sync like they'd been doing this for years instead of weeks. "Would you like to say grace tonight?" Ethan asked Grace softly. She nodded, reaching for their hands. Lily beamed as they formed their circle, just as they had every night before Grace's brief departure. But this time, when Grace spoke, her voice carried a new strength. "Dear Lord, thank you for second chances. Thank you for people who pull us back from bridges, both real and metaphorical. Thank you for the wisdom of strangers who become angels in disguise, and for the love of this family that's become my sanctuary. Help us face whatever comes tomorrow with courage and faith. Amen." "Amen," Lily echoed happily, already reaching for her fork. As they shared their meal, laughter gradually returned to the table. Lily told stories about her day at school. Grace shared more about her conversation with Mr. Harris, and Ethan spoke about his plans to request time off for the upcoming trial dates. The fear wasn't gone. They could all feel Marcus's threats looming on the horizon. But something fundamental had shifted. They weren't just three people sharing a house anymore. They were a family, choosing each other, ready to stand together against whatever storms approached. The county courthouse loomed before them, its brick walls seeming to touch the cloudy morning sky. Grace smoothed her simple navy dress, her hands trembling slightly. Ethan stood beside her on the courthouse steps, steady as always. "You've got this," he whispered, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. Inside the courtroom, polished wooden benches filled quickly. Grace sat at the front table with Mr. Daniels, her lawyer, while Marcus and his expensive attorney sat across the aisle. She could feel Marcus's cold stare, but refused to look his way. Judge Harrison, a woman with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes, called the court to order. The sound of her gavel made Grace jump slightly. Marcus's lawyer went first, rising smoothly from his chair. "Your Honor, we intend to show that Miss Miller remains emotionally unstable and unsuitable for full custody. Her recent living arrangements with Mr. Cole raised serious concerns about her judgment." Grace's heart pounded, but she held her head high. When it was her turn to speak, she stood slowly, her voice clear and strong despite her fears. "Your Honor," she began, "I won't pretend I haven't struggled. 3 months ago, I stood on a bridge, ready to give up." A soft murmur rippled through the courtroom. "But that moment taught me something. It taught me that, even in our darkest times, hope finds a way." She took a deep breath, her voice growing stronger. "I lost my job due to discrimination. I lost my confidence when Marcus twisted everything I did to look wrong. But I never, not for 1 second, stopped loving my son. Every day apart from him has been like breathing without air." Grace turned slightly, meeting Marcus's gaze for the first time. "I'm not perfect. I'm just a mother who wants to love her child, to make him feel safe and valued. That's all I've ever wanted." The judge listened intently as Grace continued. "These past weeks, living with Ethan and Lily, showed me what healing looks like. They gave me back my sense of worth when I thought it was gone forever. They showed me that family isn't about power or control, it's about love and support." When Grace finished, the courtroom was silent. Even Marcus looked uncomfortable, shifting in his seat. Mr. Daniels called Ethan to testify next. He walked to the witness stand, his work shirt pressed but worn, his honesty showing in every word. "I've seen Grace at her lowest moment," Ethan testified, his voice gentle but firm. "But more importantly, I've seen her rise. I've watched her help my daughter with homework, cook meals that made us laugh, and fight every day to be worthy of her son's love. She's not just surviving anymore, she's showing others how to live again." Lily's testimony came as a surprise. The judge allowed it after careful consideration. The little girl walked to the front, her pink dress swishing, her face serious. "Miss Grace makes me feel safe," Lily said simply. "She reads me stories and helps me remember happy things about my mom. She never tries to take my mom's place, but she gives extra love, like angels do." Her words brought tears to several eyes in the courtroom. Marcus's face had grown increasingly dark. When he testified, his smooth words couldn't hide the bitterness beneath. He spoke of Grace's instability and poor choices, but his arguments felt hollow against the simple truth of Grace's transformation. Judge Harrison listened to everyone, her expression thoughtful. When all testimony finished, she took a moment before speaking. "This court has seen many custody cases," she began. "What strikes me about this one is not the past struggles, which are real and significant, but the evidence of growth and healing. Miss Miller has shown remarkable courage in facing her challenges openly. She has built a support system and demonstrated consistent improvement in her circumstances." The judge turned her gaze directly to Grace. "Your honesty about your darkest moment speaks to your character. You've chosen to learn from it rather than hide from it." Grace held her breath as Judge Harrison continued. "After careful consideration of all testimony and evidence, I find it in the best interest of the child to restore full custody to Miss Place, Grace Miller, with reasonable visitation rights for Mr. Miller to be arranged through the court." The words took a moment to sink in. Grace's vision blurred with tears as she heard quick footsteps. Caleb, who had been waiting outside with a social worker, burst through the courtroom doors. His small face was lit with joy as he ran straight to her. "Mommy!" he cried out, launching himself into her arms. Grace caught him, holding him close, her tears falling into his dark curls. "My baby," she whispered, "my precious boy." The courtroom faded around them as mother and son held each other, making up for months of lost embraces. Caleb's arms wrapped tight around her neck, and Grace could feel his little heart beating against hers, the sweetest rhythm in the world. The late afternoon sun filtered through the windows of Ethan's modest two-story home, casting warm golden light across the living room floor. Grace stood in the doorway, her small suitcase in one hand and Caleb's backpack in the other. Her 7-year-old son bounced on his toes beside her, his dark eyes wide with wonder as he took in his new surroundings. "Come on, Caleb," Lily called from the top of the stairs. "I'll show you your room. Daddy and I got it all ready yesterday." Caleb looked up at Grace, seeking permission. She nodded, her heart swelling as she watched him bound up the stairs after Lily. Their footsteps thundered overhead, followed by excited chatter and giggles. "Welcome home," Ethan said softly, taking Grace's suitcase from her hand. His fingers brushed against hers, sending a familiar warmth through her chest. Grace followed him upstairs to the guest room, her room now. The walls were a soft yellow, and someone had placed a vase of fresh daisies on the dresser. "You didn't have to do all this," she whispered. "We wanted to." Ethan set her suitcase down. Lily picked out the flowers herself. From down the hall came the sound of children's laughter. They found Lily and Caleb in what used to be Ethan's home office, now transformed into a cozy bedroom. Lily was showing Caleb how to arrange his stuffed animals on the bed, while he carefully unpacked his treasured collection of toy cars. "Look, Mommy," Caleb held up his favorite red fire truck. "Lily made a special shelf just for my cars." Grace's eyes filled with tears as she watched her son settling in so naturally, as if he'd always belonged here. The shelf was indeed perfect, painted blue, and mounted at just the right height for a 7-year-old boy. "Daddy helped me build it," Lily explained proudly. "We worked on it all weekend." Grace turned to Ethan, overwhelmed by this simple act of kindness. He shrugged, a slight blush coloring his cheeks. It wasn't much, just some spare wood from the garage. The afternoon unfolded in a blur of unpacking and organizing. Grace found herself moving between rooms, hanging clothes in closets, arranging toiletries in the bathroom, and helping Caleb decide where to place each precious possession he'd brought from foster care. As dinner time approached, the kitchen came alive with activity. Lily insisted on making her famous spaghetti and meatballs famous because it was one of the few dishes she could help prepare without too much supervision. Caleb wanted to help too, so Ethan taught him how to tear lettuce leaves for the salad, while Grace mixed the dressing. The kitchen filled with warmth and the rich aroma of tomato sauce and garlic bread. Music played softly from the old radio on the counter, and occasionally one of the children would break into spontaneous dance moves, making everyone laugh. "Pass the Parmesan, please," Lily called out during dinner, her face already sporting a ring of tomato sauce around her mouth. "Here you go, sis," Caleb replied without thinking, then froze, looking uncertainly at the adults. Grace's heart skipped a beat, but Lily just beamed and accepted the cheese. "Thanks, bro." After dinner, while the kids worked on a puzzle in the living room, Grace and Ethan cleaned up together. They moved around each other in the kitchen with an easy familiarity that had developed over the past weeks. As Grace handed Ethan a plate to dry, their fingers touched again, and this time neither pulled away. "Grace," Ethan said softly, setting down the dish towel. "These past few weeks, I know we've both been focused on the custody battle, on making sure you got Caleb back, but there's something I need to tell you." Grace's heart thundered in her chest. She turned to face him fully, aware of the children's chatter in the background, of the warm kitchen lights, of this moment suspended in time. "That night on the bridge wasn't just about saving your life," Ethan continued. "It was about saving mine too. After Sarah died, I thought I'd never feel whole again. Lily was the only thing keeping me going. But then you came into our lives, and suddenly, the broken pieces started fitting together." Grace finished for him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Exactly." Ethan stepped closer, taking her hands in his. "I know we've both been hurt. We both carry scars. But maybe that's why this works. We understand each other's pain, and somehow, that makes the healing possible." Grace felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "I was so afraid," she admitted. "Afraid of hoping, afraid of trusting, afraid of loving again. But you and Lily, you showed me it was okay to believe in second chances." The sound of small feet padding across the kitchen floor made them turn. Lily and Caleb stood in the doorway, holding their completed puzzle proudly. "Look what we made," Caleb exclaimed. The puzzle showed a sunrise over a bridge, golden light breaking through clouds. Grace and Ethan exchanged a meaningful look, then welcomed the children into their arms for a group hug. Later that evening, after the kids were tucked into bed, Grace and Ethan sat before the fireplace. The flames cast dancing shadows on the walls, and the house felt peaceful in a way that neither had experienced in years. Ethan wrapped an arm around Grace's shoulders, pulling her close. "You know," he said softly, "I've been thinking about what you said in court today, about how sometimes we have to fall apart completely before we can rebuild ourselves stronger." Grace nodded, remembering the emotional testimony that had helped her win back custody of Caleb. "You saved me as much as I saved you," Ethan whispered, his voice full of tender conviction. Grace leaned into his embrace, feeling truly at home for the first time since that desperate night on the bridge. The fire crackled softly, its warmth matching the glow in her heart, as they sat together in comfortable silence, watching the flames dance. The evening settled softly over their home like a warm blanket. Outside, crickets chirped their gentle symphony, while inside, the soft glow of bedside lamps cast cozy shadows on the walls. Grace sat between the two beds in the children's room, a worn storybook open in her lap. Caleb snuggled deep under his blue rocket ship covers, while Lily hugged her favorite stuffed bunny close. "Just one more page, Mommy Grace," Lily pleaded, her eyes already heavy with sleep. The title, Mommy Grace, had stuck naturally, flowing from Lily's heart weeks ago. Grace smiled, her finger marking their place in the book. "You said that 3 pages ago, sweetheart." From his spot in the doorway, Ethan watched the scene unfold, his heart full. The sight of Grace reading to both children felt so right, so natural, as if she'd always belonged here. The soft lamplight caught the gentle curves of her face, highlighting the peace that had finally settled there. And the little star knew that no matter how dark the night got, morning would always come. Grace read, her voice warm and soothing. The end. Caleb yawned, his small hand reaching for hers. "I love you, Mom." Grace leaned over, pressing a kiss to his forehead. "I love you more, sunshine." She turned to Lily, who was already half asleep. "Sweet dreams, Angel." "Good night, Mommy Grace," Lily mumbled, snuggling deeper into her pillows. Grace carefully placed the book on the small shared nightstand and stood, smoothing both children's covers one last time. She moved quietly to the doorway where Ethan waited, his eyes soft with emotion. "Want to step outside for a bit?" he whispered, taking her hand. She nodded, giving the sleeping children one more glance before following him downstairs. The night air was crisp and clean as they stepped onto the back porch. Stars twinkled overhead, countless diamonds scattered across black velvet. They settled onto the wooden swing, its gentle creaking, a familiar comfort now. Grace leaned into Ethan's warmth, their fingers naturally intertwining. "I keep thinking about that night on the bridge," she said softly, her eyes distant. "How close I came to." She couldn't finish the sentence, but Ethan's arm tightened around her. "But you didn't," he reminded her gently. "You chose to stay, because you were there." Grace turned to look at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "You stopped your truck. You ran to help a complete stranger." "Best decision I ever made," Ethan said, his voice rough with emotion. He shifted to face her more fully. "That night, I was just following my heart. But now, looking back, I think God put me on that bridge for a reason." Grace nodded, remembering the roar of the river below, the foggy darkness that had seemed so final. "It feels like another lifetime ago. That woman on the bridge, she was so lost, so broken. And look at you now," Ethan said proudly. "You fought back. You won. You've got your son, your nursing license reinstated, and—" He paused, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. "And you've given Lily something I couldn't, a mother's love." Grace felt tears spill onto her cheeks, but these were different from the desperate ones she'd shed on the bridge. These were tears of gratitude, of joy, of belonging. "Promise me something?" Ethan's voice was barely above a whisper. "Anything. You'll never stand on that ledge alone again." His dark eyes held hers intently. Whatever comes, whatever storms we face them together. You, me, and our children. The word our sent warmth spreading through Grace's chest. She reached up to touch his cheek, feeling the slight stubble under her fingers. I promise. They sat in comfortable silence, the swing moving gently beneath them. The night air carried the sweet scent of blooming jasmine from Grace's newly planted garden. Inside, they could hear the soft ticking of the kitchen clock, marking peaceful moments instead of lonely ones. "Want to walk down to the creek?" Ethan asked after a while. "The sunrise should be starting soon." Grace smiled, remembering how many times they'd made this walk over the past weeks, sharing quiet conversations and growing closer with each step. "I'd love to." Hand in hand, they followed the familiar path down to Willow Creek. The old bridge loomed above them, but it no longer held any terror for Grace. Instead, it stood as a reminder of how far she'd come, of the night that had led her to this new life. They found their usual spot on a smooth boulder near the water's edge. The sky was just beginning to lighten, turning from black to deep blue. The first rays of sun painted the clouds in soft pink and gold, reflecting off the creek's surface like scattered gems. Ethan's hand was warm and steady in hers, his presence as constant as the sunrise itself. Grace leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing. Together, they watched night give way to morning, darkness yielding to light, just as their own hearts had healed and opened to love again. The sun rose fully over Willow Creek, its warm rays touching everything with golden promise. Birds began their morning songs, and a gentle breeze rustled through the willow trees. Grace felt Ethan's lips press softly against her temple, and she closed her eyes, savoring the moment. This was home. This was family. This was the beginning of their forever. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Ethan Cole, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please, don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.